So you're a fan of knives. Where's the interest in
Yeah.
knives come from, by the way?
That's more metaphorical. The truth is that in the modern world, a knife is not an efficient weapon. It would easily be overwhelmed by firearms. My fascination with knives comes more in the sense that they convey a spirit to my students, where a knife is made of steel, and steel begins as ore in the ground. It's an ugly, unfinished product, which through the enactment of knowledge, time, and discipline can be transformed into beautiful, shining steel. It can have something which it begins as something which has no real function and becomes one of the most functional and important tools in all of human history, without which human civilization could never have even begun. It's what separated humans and took us from the bottom of the food chain and began our gradual rise towards the top of the food chain. So it has immense historical and cultural value, but it has this metaphorical value insofar as the martial artist begins as a white belt like iron ore, but over time transforms into some beautiful shining steel, which can have immense value. In addition, there's a sense of maintenance. As remarkable as steel is, it is in need of constant maintenance. It will fall apart through rust, and neglect will destroy a blade, both in terms of rust and the edge falling apart. And so just as the martial artist, it's not good enough just to learn the techniques. You need to maintain them over time. And just as steel is perishable, so too are the skills of martial arts. And that when I give a gift of a knife to a student, these metaphorical elements start to emerge. They see, okay, I began as iron ore and I want to become the finished blade. There's another sense in which a knife is morally neutral. A knife can be used to save a life. It can be used to cook a meal, but it can also be used for murder, for the worst possible purposes. Jiu-jitsu is the same way. Jiu-jitsu can make you a better person. It can make you a worse person. Jiu-jitsu is just a power. It's not a particularly great power, but it is a power. And like all power, it can be used for both good and bad. It's morally neutral in itself. And it's up to us to make sure that just as the knife gets used for good purposes rather than bad, so too that jiu-jitsu be used for good purposes rather than bad. There's also an element where the basis of the knife is steel. And historically, there's always been a riddle of steel, which is steel has the property of both hardness and suppleness. The harder you make steel, the better its edge retention becomes. The longer that edge will stay sharp. This is good, but it comes at a price. The harder you make steel, the more brittle it becomes. And now that edge can be damaged easily. So the solution is to make the steel softer, more malleable. That will prevent breakage of the blade and chipping of the edge. But when you make the steel softer, that comes at a price. And that price is now the edge loses its sharpness very easily. And so the riddle of steel is how to work with these two to the greatest degree possible and create an edge which is hard enough to stay sharp for long periods of time, but without making the steel so brittle that the blade overall is compromised. So too in jiu-jitsu. Your task in training is to make the training competitive enough that you actually get used to the rigors of real combat. But on the other hand, it can't be so brutal that the athletes get broken down in the gym to a point where they're no longer effective. And so this duality of hardness and softness, which we see in the case of blades, is there in the training of the jiu-jitsu athlete. So I often give a gift of a knife to a student when they've done something significant, because it demonstrates in a metaphorical way these key themes of the sport.
Well, I've been honored to be a student of yours. I've been plagued by injury. but I hope to one day earn one such knife. And I think that's a really powerful metaphor. I'm really honored that you would spend any time with me in any context, but especially on the mat and especially today in conversation. John, you're an incredible person. Thank you for everything you do. Congratulations for historic accomplishment. It's always beautiful and inspiring to see greatness. And what we saw at ADCC was greatness, rare greatness. And it's beautiful to see that humans can achieve that kind of thing. So thank you for making that happen. And thank you for talking today.
Thank you, Lex.